I'm sure most, if not all of us, have seen the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz. It's so memorable. The ruby red slippers, the colorful whimsy of Munchkinland, the bone-chilling cackle of the Wicked Witch of the West, the sweet croon of Judy Garland's rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The fantasy and thrill of this tale is timeless. But, like all things, it has a darker side. And I thought with the recent release of Wicked Part 1, it would be the perfect time to talk about the movie that started film enthusiasts' love of Oz. So, like I said, The Wizard of Oz came out in 1939, and it was produced by MGM for about $3 million, which is equivalent to $55 million today. Once released, the movie won 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Original Score and one for Best Original Song, which was, of course, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But when it really got cemented into a lot of people's lives was when it aired on CBS in 1956. But let's go behind the Technicolor and the catchy songs, and let's talk about some of the things that made this production so very dark. So although motion pictures had been around for decades at this point, experimentation was still a very crucial part of filmmaking, and this was no exception for the makeup team. They had to find a way to make all of these colorful characters really stand out on screen. When they were brainstorming ideas for what to do with the Tin Man, they thought about using paper or like colored cardboard, even real tin for his makeup, but they ultimately landed on using aluminum dust. And I read that aluminum isn't harmful in large amounts, but you have to imagine the actor that was going to be playing the Tin Man, Buddy Ebsen, he was going to have that shit plastered all over his face for multiple hours a day. 4 days on end. Every time Buddy moved, acted, sang, danced, anything, he was probably breathing in this aluminum dust. And by the 9th day of filming, Buddy was experiencing shortness of breath and cramping. Buddy was rushed to the hospital, put on oxygen, and was treated for aluminum poisoning. And thankfully, after about 2 weeks, he was able to recover, but by then the casting had moved on to a new Tin Man. But this wasn't the end for Buddy's career. He went on to keep acting, and he's most famously known for his 1960s role in the Beverly Hillbillies. With the new Tin Man, Jack Haley, they decided that they would keep using the aluminum, but that they would mix it with paint. And so it was very much less toxic than just pure aluminum dust. That being said, though, Jack did develop an eye infection at one point, and he was out of filming for about 4 days, but was able to recover and successfully shoot the rest of the movie. The makeup was just as intense, if not more so, for the actor that played the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger. His entire head and face had to be covered in this latex mask to give him this kind of burlap sack appearance. And so every day it took an hour to apply this mask and to take it off. And they had to make a new mask every single day. So by the end of filming, they had gone through about 100 latex masks. On the last day of filming, Ray asked if he himself could take off the mask because usually like the makeup artist would do it for him. And when he took off the mask, for the first time, he realized that he had this same like little waffly pattern around his mouth and chin. And if you look at photos of him when he was still like in his 70s, 80s, you can still see a little bit of this waffly pattern on his face. Like the mask literally scarred into his face. So if the makeup team was using heavy metals and throwaway masks to doll up their actors, you can only imagine what was going on in the wardrobe department. They were brewing up different ideas on how to make the Cowardly Lion costume. And what better way to emulate a lion than to use real lion pelts? The problem with that, though, is that it's really hard to make because every lion obviously has a little bit of a different fur pattern. So to make sure that things stayed consistent through the shots, they only made 2 costumes really. One that the actor would shoot in and one just in case for a little backup. And this was kind of a win-win because the lion pelts were obviously super expensive. So by only making 2 suits, they really could cut down the costs. For the lion's mane, they used a real human hair wig, and that really finished off the look and brought it together. Broadway and vaudeville star Bert Lahr was cast as the Cowardly Lion, and so day in, day out, this man was wearing the same exact Cowardly Lion costume, made out of real lion pelts, sitting under the fucking hot heat lamps of the set, I have to imagine that it was probably 100+ degrees inside that suit. And he was singing, dancing, acting. That's wild, the amount of dedication. I wouldn't last a day. And like sometimes when I'm filming, this tiny little ass ring light I have up here, it gets a little hot. Can you imagine stage lights every direction and you're in like a mascot suit? God bless this man, because there would be no way. Plus the costume had the tail attached with like this wooden block in the back of the costume. So he probably couldn't even sit down. His ass probably hurt because he had this wooden block pressed up against it. I forgot to add that the costume weighed like 100 pounds. This man was literally doing a workout every single day, and he couldn't really eat or drink anything because of the prosthetics that he had on his face. So he had to drink everything through a straw. Bless his heart. And then there was Margaret Hamilton. I'm sure many of us know about her. She played the Wicked Witch of the West. Throughout the entire shoot, she and her stunt double, Betty Danko, were subjected to these super dangerous stunts. For example, we could talk about the scene in Munchkinland where the Wicked Witch pops out of this cloud of red smoke. And this was achieved by having the actor stand under the stage, and there was a hole and it was covered by this thin piece of aluminum, so the stunt double could kind of pop up through that and just kind of appear to be emerging from the smoke. While they were practicing this stunt, Betty was waiting for her cue under the stage, and a member of the crew walked over that aluminum sheet, fell through the stage, and landed on Betty's shoulder. And the injury was so severe that she couldn't even really like lift her arm or drive very well. It's kind of crazy because it seems like sort of a simple stunt, and I was kind of reading this like, who would think that this scene would be so dangerous? But it really was, and Margaret was its next victim. To keep the scene consistent, the director wanted Margaret to say her last line, and then she herself would kind of do that last stunt where she disappeared back under the stage. And to achieve this, instead of using the aluminum sheet, they now had replaced that with an elevator that would lower Margaret down. They filmed one really solid take, and then they took a break for lunch. Then they came back with the intention of filming just one more good one, just for safe measure. So they kept trying to take this second take, and things just kept going wrong. And at one point, the director looked at Margaret and said, "I want this shot done right and done right now." So they tried it again, but this time the flames went off too early as Margaret was still being lowered, and so she wasn't to safety yet. So the broom she was holding in her hand caught fire, burned her hand, and burned her face to the point where Margaret had 2nd and 3rd degree burns. And to make matters worse, Margaret was covered head to toe in copper-based green paint. And much like aluminum, copper is toxic if it gets into your skin, and she had open wounds. So the crew members had to literally clean out her burns with alcohol. And she later described this pain as being like the worst thing she's ever felt. Like it literally took her breath away. She wasn't able to return to set for 6 weeks and had residual damage when she did finally come back. Back on set, the next scene that Margaret was supposed to film was a skywriting scene. But when the crew members told her that her costume was now flame resistant, but that the scene was completely safe, she outright just refused to do it, and I don't blame her for that at all. At this point, like, she was definitely in her right mind to refuse doing that kind of thing. Which then, of course, Betty had to step in and do the stunt for her. So they brought in Betty Danko, and she was to sit on a broom high above the stage. The broom was tricked out with this pipe that would spew out all this black smoke, and then her cape would be fastened down and around the pipe. During practice, everything was going to plan, but then when the director came in just to take a peek, see how things were going, he thought that this scene would look more cool if the Wicked Witch of the West cape was like blowing in the wind behind her. So the special effects team had to fix their contraption to better fit the scene. They ended up moving the pipe from the back of the broom to underneath the broom where there was like a little seat. So they kind of attached it under the seat, and they started practicing the scene again. On the 3rd run, the pipe literally exploded under Betty, sending her flying. She was lucky enough to grab onto the broom, which left her suspended mid-air hanging upside down. She was quickly lowered to the stage and was taken to the hospital, where she ended up staying for 11 days to treat a very severe leg burn. And because of this, they had to bring in another stunt double to finish the scene. And while we're kind of talking about wiring and hanging midair, I couldn't find a lot of information about this, but evidently a couple of the flying monkeys, while they were filming different stunts, ended up falling to the ground because their wires snapped. So like, I don't know what they were doing back then, but like they needed some stronger wires or something. Damn. And even the characters that didn't really have stunts were still in danger on this set. For example, at the time, they often used asbestos as fake snow because it was fireproof, it looked really natural and nice, and it kind of piled up like real snow would. So the snow seen falling on Dorothy and her friends in the poppy field scene is literally just clumps of asbestos. And if you didn't know, this can cause mesothelioma if you are exposed to it for long periods of time. So, I mean, they were just the set was just trying to kill these actors. There's no way around it. And I know, like, some people are probably going to say, oh, you know, like, they didn't know any better. And they didn't. But it's just interesting to see how film has evolved in different ways. Like, they just thought it was this harmless little thing, this little trick to make fake snow when it was very dangerous. It's kind of crazy because nobody was safe on this set, okay? Not even Toto, which was played by a dog named Terry. So cute, by the way. But her little foot got stepped on by one of the Winky guards when they were filming a scene, and she broke her little paw. And that's so sad. They had to get a fill-in dog while Terry was recovering. That makes me so sad. And I feel like it wouldn't be right if we didn't at least touch on Judy Garland and her insane life before and during The Wizard of Oz. Judy Garland was basically thrust into the spotlight at birth. As a toddler, she was literally 2.5 years old. She joined her sisters in their vaudeville group called the Gum Sisters. By the time Judy reached double digits, her mom Ethel was forcing her to take different kinds of pills, both uppers and downers, one to help her stay focused while she was performing and one to kind of knock her out to help her get some sleep. At 13, Judy was signed on to MGM Studios, and the following year she was in her first film. From basically the moment she stepped onto set, the producers were obsessed with her weight. They would call her horrible things like fat little piggy with pigtails and a little hunchback. She was basically forced into this very strict diet that consisted of black coffee, cigarettes, chicken soup, and of course, pills. And as I was researching this, I just kept trying to remind myself that this was a teenage girl probably just starting to go through puberty. So it's very, very normal to have your weight fluctuate. Maybe you gain a little bit more weight, the way that you eat changes, the way that you start viewing your body changes. So this just had to be extremely detrimental on her physical, mental, and emotional health. But since she was under constant eyes and cameras, she was forced into this very restrictive lifestyle. And she later recounted that this was very normal, not just for her, but for all young actors that acted for MGM. They had us working days and nights on end. They'd give us pills to keep us on our feet long after we were exhausted. Then they'd take us to the studio hospital and knock us out with sleeping pills. And if this wasn't horrific enough, Judy was constantly being harassed by the higher-ups at MGM. In her biography, she stated that from ages like 16 to 20, she was almost constantly being asked by older men to have sex. Even the studio head, Louis B. Mayer, was part of this problem. She later recounted that a few times Louis was like, "Oh, I love how you sing from the heart," and would touch her breast that was like on the left side, like, "Oh, I'm just touching her heart," but he was literally groping her. Which is fucking disgusting. Finally, when Judy reached adulthood and she stood up to him, he started crying like a little bitch baby because she didn't love him. Another executive tried to pressure Judy into having sex with him, and when she refused, he told her that he was going to ruin her. But of course, we know that Judy went on to be cast as one of, the world's probably most well-known characters, Dorothy. Originally, the studio wanted to have a younger actor, Shirley Temple, in this role, but because she was signed on to another studio, just like it didn't really work out, so they decided on Judy Garland. But because Judy was 16, they wanted to make her appear as young as possible. So they basically strapped down her chest and made her wear a corset throughout the duration of the film. Through all of the production of the film, she was forced into long hours on set, popping pills, and following the studio's diet. After The Wizard of Oz, Judy went on to work for MGM until 1950, and then once she was out on her own, she continued to star in many films. But the addiction and bad habits adopted from both her mother and the studio plagued her long after she was detached from MGM. Through no fault of her own, she fell victim to alcoholism, pill addiction, and lots of different mental health problems. It's kind of interesting because when I talk to certain people about this movie, some of them are like, oh my God, this movie is so joyous, it's so happy. But a lot of people also say that it makes them feel very sad and a little bit unsettled. And I really think that the way that people were treated, the things they were subjected to on set, kind of bleeds through a little bit, and you can see it in the film. And although this topic is very well known, probably a little bit too talked about today, it's crazy that the treatment on set went unnoticed for so long. And this was just kind of like a normal thing. People get hurt on set. People have to go on these crazy diets. Like, it's just part of the thing. It's just what you do as an actor. That's the sacrifices you make. But it's crazy that how things like this would never fly today. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have not seen Wicked Part 1, you should go see it. I know it's really over talked about, but it is a good movie. I think whether you like musicals or not, I think you can really enjoy it. The sets are really cool. Of course, the music's really great. The CGI is awesome too. So it's just all around a fun movie if you have a couple hours. Please feel free to like, subscribe, give a little comment down below. What kind of vibes do you guys get from The Wizard of Oz? To me, I have not watched the movie in a long time, I won't lie, but it did always kind of have this eerie feeling to me, and I don't know if it's because of like the sepia to color to back to sepia kind of feel. I don't know if that's why, but it does have kind of an eerie feeling, so I kind of am interested to know what you guys think. I'm going to say this here too, but I'm going to be moving pretty soon in a couple weeks. So the videos might be a little bit more sporadic, but I'm going to try to stay consistent as I possibly can. But I just want to give you guys a heads up. I'm not slacking on purpose. I'm just slacking because there's a lot to do. But anyway, I love you guys. I hope you guys are having a great little holiday season, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Keep being the bad bitches that you are. Bye, guys.